So my number three is Erin Brockovich from 2000, directed by Steven Soderbergh, starring the one and only Julia Roberts, Albert Finney, and a whole bunch of other folks. Quick log line from IMDb: an unemployed single mother becomes a legal assistant and almost single-handedly brings down a California power company accused of polluting a city's water supply. It's actually a pretty well-written
That's
description,
it.
I
Yeah,
think.
that's the
Yeah,
movie.
that is the movie. I think a lot of people have probably seen this movie or have seen stills of this movie. This is Julia's Oscar win. Um, but as the description says, for me, this movie is on the list because this is obviously somebody that I had no idea who they were. I mean, this is a real life person, but I had no idea who they were when I watched the movie and hadn't read the book that it was probably. Is it based on a book? It probably is, I think.
I'm actually not sure. Either a
It's
book or
actually
a
not. It doesn't seem
magazine
like it.
article, maybe a magazine article. I mean, it was. I didn't know of her at the time either. But if you maybe you grew up in California, this was in the news a lot around that
Probably.
time.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, that's sort of why this movie is on my list, and I'll go into kind of more detail. But had you watched this movie before?
Yeah, I'd seen this on probably VHS tape rental around the time it came out. I'm not a Julia Roberts fan, so I did
I
not seek it
know.
out in theaters. And this was around the time I was actually getting into Steven Soderbergh in a big way. So
Mm,
I at this point I wasn't so obsessed with him where I would have seen this anyway. So I saw it on VHS. It might even actually been after she won her Academy Award. I thought it was fine back then and hadn't seen it in 20 years actually, and thought it was still totally serviceable and fine now. Maybe a lesser Soderbergh. If
ah,
I had to put in the rank, and probably be in the bottom third. But maybe that's just because my bias against, or not bias against, but Julia doesn't really ever do it for me, except surprisingly in Notting Hill. If you folks want to go back and listen to that episode, it was
yeah.
the first time she ever worked in a movie for me. But yeah, I think it's definitely a very serviceable film. Is probably the best way I can put it.
Hmm. No, I don't. I guess I can see that, and I'd love to kind of dig into more on why you felt that way. But yeah, when I watched this movie the first time, it definitely resonated a lot with me. And I only knew Julia from a handful of romantic comedies. So to sort of
Mm-hmm.
see her in this sort of role, which is kind of powerful and out there and uses her brain, her sexuality, all of it to kind of advance this cause.
Mm-hmm.
And also, this is classic Soderbergh, right? Like it's great filmmaking. It's intimate, but it's stylized, but it also feels real, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very compelling. It pulls you in. There's so many movies, that have been made of this nature, like a whistleblower or a single person's arc who's kind of a reluctant hero at the beginning, but then
Mm-hmm.
has this whole hero's journey. And often those movies can be very simple, like to use your word, serviceable
Mm-hmm.
kind of portrayals, versus this one, in addition to its compelling story and performance, it's actually quite moving and quite compelling and kind of has like a thrillery aspect to it. And that is all Soderbergh, I
Mm-hmm.
think, which is why, yeah, I wouldn't put this in his top tier, but to me, this is sort of in the second tier, I would say. And there are other tiers beneath it. So yeah,
Okay. I mean,
just to
yeah.
clarify, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
There's a third and the fourth tier. So
Oh, 4 tiers. Wow, I only have 3 tiers. You got to add a fourth tier on there.
I'm just adding one on the
Yeah,
fly.
okay, that's fine. You can add another tier.
So yeah, this is why I've really always enjoyed this movie. And then the big fun thing, which I don't know how much this is true or just dramatized for the movie, is that
Mm-hmm.
this person is sort of a lost person in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, they're chasing this cause to actually save themselves or find something to do, but then it ends up taking over their whole life.
Right.
And to me, that's the fun part about this. And fun in the sense that it's fun somebody, discovering that for themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
then also discovering their superpower, because
Right.
they weren't a hero before this at all. And
Mm-hmm.
but what the movie does a good job at is that you see all those ingredients right at the get-go. A movie like this would ring really false to me if suddenly somebody comes into their power and you're wondering how did they get all these ingredients in them.
Right.
But you see those right at the get-go, the way she's handling her kids, the way she's talking to Aaron Eckhart's character. Like she's a hard ass. She
Right.
lost and chaotic, but she also knows what she wants, and she's super headstrong. So the movie then builds on that, that okay, if this person finds their cause and gets the right support, can they take off? And
Mm-hmm.
she does, and it of
Mm-hmm.
course comes at a cost, and she makes mistakes and what have you. So yeah, this is why you kind of live vicariously through this person. And I don't know, I always had big kind of cheer moments, like
Oh yeah.
the one in the office at the very end, and when she makes them sip the dirty water.
Oh yeah.
All of those scenes, they never get old for me, and I think she's great. Like, this is the last thing I say, that Soderbergh is, and we talked about this in the Ocean's 11 episode too, like he's one of the few contemporary directors who really knows how to use his stars,
Definitely. Yeah.
like underline who they are, what their star power, their star narrative is, how people know them, but uses them in a way that feels right to the story,
Mm-hmm.
and enlarge that thing that they have already. So this is a very Julia performance. This is not a transformation into somebody
Right.
totally different. You can see Julia, but it's used to bring out Erin, which I think is brilliant. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's Julia was the casting in this, again, who I'm just not a fan of her persona, but her persona is what makes this movie work. And maybe for
Yeah.
me, why it doesn't elevate it enough, because I'm not a big fan
Ah,
of her. But I think casting her in this role is really critical, because a lot of what Erin, you were just using words to describe Erin, headstrong, pushy, and these things could come across as very negative.
yeah.
And the woman could come across as was very negative too. But because people already love Julia and she's known for these sweeter romantic movies, you can kind of the rougher edges that she brings out in Erin in this role don't make you think less of Erin at all, because Julia brings herself into it too. And I think that's what works so well, and make you always empathize with the main character, even when sometimes, yeah, she might be a little pushy or off color, but that's actually, those are her superpowers in
I
this
think so.
this
Yeah.
particular role of trying to beat back a big corporation who's done horrible things to these folks. You want a lawyer who's kind of a shark, that won't take no for an answer, that will go out there and do the work, and because they're all doing it on behalf of these innocent victim clients that she has. So it's very, very admirable. And I'd never heard of Erin Brockovich, the person, until this movie at all. And
Mm-hmm.
she's the great thing about her is she's used her fame not to cash in and just retire on that, or get a TV show. It's Erin Brockovich on CNN or whatever, just get a payday. She's still out there fighting
Yeah.
for people around the United States when they are put in these situations. There was a horrible train disaster in East Palestine in the last couple of months, spilled all these toxic chemicals. Very few politicians or ever seem to care, but she went down there and talked to those people and was trying to get their story out, and the government more involved in helping these people. And she's using her fame that she got from this film to still fight the good fight and not just cash in, which I think is super admirable. I'm a big fan of Erin Brockovich, the person. She's super awesome, and it's just great to see her still fighting today on these things.
That's amazing. I did not know that, but that's really cool. But see, that's the thing, right? Like, for listeners, like a quick sort of sneak peek, this episode originally was titled Heroes. I really struggle with that, because to me, I can't sort of glorify a person, like that at all. Maybe, a few members of my family, but even they are with flaws. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
that term, I guess, to me, and maybe other people don't look at that term in that way, but to me, people who make impact and stand up for something, like all humans, they are going to be complicated characters. They're not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be likable. They're not supposed to be right all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They need not be put up on the pedestal, even though they're doing good things. And
Right.
I think, like you're saying, like this mashup of Erin and Julia is sort of amazing, that even in her unlikability, you root for her.
Right.
And that's okay, because you don't have to like all aspects of somebody. It's more about what path are they chartering? What are they
Exactly.
standing up for?
Right, right. And a lot of times I actually find movies that deal with characters like this, where they do show some of the negative sides, make it more impactful, because then it's like, wow, this is just a person like you or me. Like we're
Yeah.
both really flawed. We have good things and bad things about us. And
I
so
mean,
do these
speak for
people.
yourself, but yeah,
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
And so do these other people, but look what they're able to accomplish. And that to me is what's
Exactly.
inspiring about, true heroes like Erin Brockovich, who is not perfect, but she's still, doing things I would call heroic. And I think
I
this
think
movie
so
does a
too.
good job of painting that picture. And in Julia's performance, I think it's more about her casting than her performance per se, that Soderbergh, and they just choosing her as a perfect vehicle for this. I mean, it is a star vehicle, like you said. And I think it all just comes down to the casting for why this movie works as well as it does. The casting of Erin specifically, because it isn't really an ensemble piece, as great as Albert Finney is.
Right.
But
you need those pieces too.
You
but
do.
Yeah, this is definitely Erin. But I think Julia is amazing in this movie. And I'm so happy that if we were going to give an Oscar to, a star who is truly maybe one of the last global mega movie stars, I'm happy that she has an Oscar for this movie as opposed to anything else. Because, it's a transformation, quote unquote. It builds on all of her personas and everything that, people have loved her for, but dials it up.
No. Yeah, it's a good performance. Definitely the Academy was right in that Oscar for sure. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.